Hello and welcome to the video. This video is all about this little thing here. Now this is one of the latest models from EMAX. This is the TinyHawk 2 Race. Now I'm going to do some flying video and talk about this. EMAX tend to come out with some really good models. And for those of you that think that, hang on a minute, that looks a little bit familiar. Yeah, kind of does, because it's kind of a beefed up version of this. Now this is the EMAX TinyHawk 2. I reviewed it a while ago and compared it to the Mobula 6. The Mobula 6 was like a little race car, and this is a standard kind of TinyHawk, the latest iteration from EMAX, and just flies beautiful. And because it has all the prop guards on, it is great for indoors because you tend to bounce off stuff. Now this only weighs 31.1 grams. This thing has got rid of the prop guards, it's got beefier motors, it has a carbon fiber frame, and it also has a little bit more extra weight. It's 46.8 grams. But the changes mean that this is much more of a performance quad than its baby brother. So this EMAX 2 Race, I'm guessing, is EMAX answer to all of those things, like the Mobula 7 and the toothpicks, but because it's from EMAX, it's built incredibly well. So while I unbox this, let me go through some of the specs. Now this is a 90mm wheelbase. It comes in this great little box, as all the EMAX stuff does. We get one set of propellers and we get a couple of batteries in here as well as the adapters to fly either 1S, where you have a little plug that goes into the other port of the battery connector, or you can fly it on 2S. The frame material on the top is very similar to the frame that the TinyHawk 2 is actually made from. It's like a polypropylene, and again it is a carbon fiber frame at the bottom. The motors on this are 1103 7500 kV motors. They're running 2-inch avian blur props. No spare props in the case, unlike with the TinyHawk 2. It's an all-in-one flight controller in the middle, running Maytech 411 hardware. I'll show you that in a minute. We'll connect it to Betaflight. I'll show you how it's all set up and tuned. It's a 4-in-1 BL Heli S ESC in here. The receiver is one of those SPI units from EMAX, compatible with FreeSky D8 mode. I haven't tried it with D16 here. I guess you could do. This is one of those things that I think needs to be addressed by some of these smaller models. Support for the D16 protocol that's much more widely used in places like Europe would be a welcome addition. Battery connectors are the JST PH 2.0. Again, there's two of those. The camera is a little run cam unit, so it is the Nano 2. And that Nano 2 performs nicely, again in the same kind of adjustable mount that we're used to from the TinyHawk 2. VTX is 25, 100 and 200 milliwatts switchable, 37 channels including race band, smart audio controlled, and again, and you will have to put the props on, because unlike all the other EMAXs I've had in of this kind of class, this one needs a little bit of work. Now the props just push on. You will need a 1.5mm hex driver to attach them, and that is not included in the kit, although a little screwdriver is. I mean, that would have been a nice little addition just to make the setup nice and quick. Just like on its little brother, the TinyHawk 2, on this TinyHawk 2 Race, the USB port is available at the top, and I do like that. It does allow you to have it sat flat while you plug it into Betaflight. So let's have a look in Betaflight and I'll show you how it's all configured. So plugging it in, we can see that everything is moving okay, and let's enable expert mode, go through. So ports are very basic, apart from smart audio being set up for UART2 to control the VTX. Configuration looks like this: D-Shock 600, motor stop isn't turned on, so the props are going to be armed as soon as you start it. Interestingly, the gyro is rotated 180 degrees, so be aware of that. 8K PID and gyro loops, which means the CPU is running a little bit hard, and everything else looks pretty standard. Again, SPI receiver support, FreeSky D protocol is a default. There is a little button on the side of the flight controller that if you push in and hold it for 2 seconds will put it into bind mode. Air mode's on, OSD turned on, anti-gravity's turned on full time, dynamic filter. RX set will set the beeps. I'd also turn receiver lost and turn some of these other things on as well. This will disappear in the grass when it comes down where you're not expecting it to. I've had a couple of cases where turning on the buzzer and configuring it has saved my bacon and allowed me to find this thing in the grass. Power and battery looks like that. Failsafe is set to drop, which is exactly where I want it to be. PID tuning looks like this. Let me just click through each of the profiles so you can see. The way it flies is very nice. Might not be to everyone's taste, might be a little bit tame for a couple of people, but actually I found this really fun to fly without changing anything. So here, just so you can see it, it's always useful, I think, to go through the Betaflight settings on stuff like this in case something goes wrong on yours and you want to see how it was set. Just a couple of rate profiles as well. Go, that's how all that works. Modes, this is how it's set up out the box. I like this. This is very similar to how I set all my quads up. So there's an arm switch. There's also another switch that will do angle in the low position, horizon in the middle, and kind of a rate mode at the top. And there's also nicely a little beeper set up too. So pretty much everything I'd expect. There's also the flip over after crash if you are lucky enough to not come down in long grass. If it's long grass, then you'll end up with grass stains everywhere. OSD came like this. I tweaked a couple of things. And then finally in the CLI, if I just type version, we can see it's version 4.1 of Betaflight. Target name, Maytech F411RX. So that's how it's set up in Betaflight. What's it like to fly? Well, on 1S, it is very docile. It's hovering just above half throttle. Perfect for indoors if you're happy with those exposed props bouncing into things that you care about. However, on 2S outside, it is a lovely, fast, agile little quad to fly, hovering at about a quarter throttle with absolutely tons of power to get in and out of trouble. Now, if you're on 2S, I personally would put the camera up a little bit more. Otherwise, when you are opening the throttle, you'll just be looking at the ground because you'll have to be cranked right the way over. Camera is performing quite nice, slightly oversaturated, maybe a little bit of red tinging as well, but I'm having an absolute blast with this. Again, this is flying on outside on 2S without any problems at all. Flight time is only going to be a handful of minutes, even though the batteries supplied on this are two 450 milliamp hours. It seems to be pulling a little bit more current with those larger motors and slightly more aggressive props than the ones that are on the TinyHawk 2. So what do I think? Well, you can probably tell by looking at this one. Hopefully you can see all the grass stains on it. I've been having an absolute blast with this. It flies in a very docile way on 1S if you use the plug in the battery connector. But on 2S, it is quite an aggressive little beastie. In terms of pure flying enjoyment out the box, I would say the Modular 7 still pips it at the post. But if you add in the quality of the build with the EMAX and the fact that occasionally I do get messages from people talking about some of the happy model quality issues, then if you want one that you can rely on, then this is probably the best option for going out and flying like you stole it. It is also relatively quiet as well when you're flying around. Let me just go back to that indoor footage. And hopefully you can hear there, even in a relatively small room with not a lot of soft furnishings, it's pretty quiet. And even when you're outside and you are giving it a lot of aggressive flying, it's not one of those things that sounds intimidating. So you could probably fly this in an area where you wouldn't dare fly something with a little bit more power. There are only a couple of things that I would draw your attention to if you're thinking about this. It won't fit back in the little box that it comes in if you fit the props. That's a bit of a shame really, because if they'd have made the cutout a little bit differently, it would have still fit in. I like those boxes for transporting these little things and for keeping them safe on the shelf. So hopefully EMAX will change that so that once you put the props on, you can actually put it back in the little box that it came in. Be aware the power levels for the VTX are not the same in the Betaflight OSD as on here because the mapping is slightly different. It's covered in the manual, but be aware of that. It's 2500 and 200, so when you select the higher power levels, it isn't going to be the same. Again, all covered in the manual. Not a big fan of the SPI stuff on here. I wish they would update the SPI receivers to work a lot better with the X series protocol. There are S bus pads on here which would allow you to solder a separate receiver if you really wanted to. Something like an XM Plus or something like that would allow you for D16 and probably give you better range. My experience with these, if you try and force these things to use X series protocol, you get into trouble quite quickly, even if you do things like turn telemetry off. Sad there's no spare props in the box, particularly as they're exposed. So my advice would be order yourself a spare set, because whereas with its baby brother, if you bump into something, it's just going to bounce off. This is going to try and rip a hole in it. And also, it would have been nice, EMAX, if you'd put a little Allen key or something in the box. Now, if you're someone like me, you've got those kind of things knocking around, but if you haven't and you've just got this and you're trying to put it together, if you're going to use little Allen bolts to hold the props on, then pop a little Allen key in there. For the 3-4 cents it's going to cost you, it'll just save the person receiving the model an awful lot of hassle. And that is probably the last thing, really. Do order your batteries. Just getting 2 of these things is only going to give you 4 or 5 minutes flight time. Really depends on how you're flying it. But I know the question I'm going to get is, well, which one should I get? Should I get the race or should I get the standard TinyHawk 2? And I guess that depends on how you want to fly it. This is a beautiful, relaxed flying model. It is an immense amount of fun. It's perfect for indoors, and it will do outdoors on 2S if you really want to, but it's not ideal for that. It's not optimal. Flying around indoors in sports halls or in your house or practicing while you can't get out if you're socially isolated, then this is a great option. However, if you want the EMAX quality, a Pixhawk style that is a lot more aggressive and a lot faster in outdoors, but could still do indoors if you're prepared to have the exposed props, then this is the one I would go for. So hopefully that helps those of you that have seen this out there, and hopefully that explains the difference between the two. EMAX continue to make some of the best little quads out there, not just if you're looking at out-and-out performance, but also with the quality of how these things are put together as well. Thank you for watching my video and watching right to the very end. If you want to find out what I'm currently working on, you can follow me on social media by searching for Painless360 in the usual places. If you'd like to become part of the inner circle, then you can become a Patreon. Details are in the description and you get lots of additional benefits. Check out the playlist section on the channel too. I organise all of my videos into playlists and it's called something like Introduction to or for Beginners. All of the content is aimed so that you can start at the very beginning and it teaches you that subject, starting with simple principles and moving up to teach you everything you need to know.